Hi, everyone. So let's go over some of these pattern recognition problems. I want to make sure that you understand what you're looking for when you're translating an argument in English or some natural language into TL. So as I've said previously, I usually look for logical indicator words. And in this case, there is an implied then right there. I also need to stress that no is a logical indicator word. So there's a not right there. Here's another no. Not. So this is kind of the first step in isolating the propositions that we're working with. So reliable way to tell that you're dreaming. There it is again, reliable way to tell that you're dreaming. And let me use a different color here for the other one. Sure, you're not dreaming right now. Sure, you're not dreaming right now. So once you've kind of isolated the propositions that you're talking about and isolated the logical indicator words, then you can really kind of begin to translate. This is pretty straightforward. The R is, oops, let me switch over to red here. The R is the red proposition. So the R just simply means there's a reliable way to tell that you're dreaming. The blue, sorry, not the blue, but the no is the tilde, right? So there is no reliable way to tell that you're dreaming. Same thing down here. You know that you're working with an if then, so there is your horseshoe right there. And green, we have here, you're sure you're not dreaming right now. You're sure you're not dreaming right now. And of course, it's saying that you can't be sure you're not dreaming right now, which means there is your tilde. So I know it's a bit of a mess right now, but don't worry. Let me just kind of wrap this up here and then we'll read it together. You can't be sure you're not dreaming right now is right here. So these are the connections that I'm making. And that's sort of the idea that you know, the way I visualize it. Obviously, I don't typically scribble all over something when I'm trying to you know, translate it. But if you want to just see what the way I read that just says it is not the case. So the way you typically read horseshoe statements, by the way, it's you kind of, you know, you have to begin with the horseshoe counterintuitively. You say if this, then this. So you kind of have to read the horseshoe before it even pops up, if that makes any sense. So the way you read that argument is if it is, so I guess I'll keep scribbling here. If it is not the case that there is a reliable way to tell that you're dreaming, then it is not the case that you can be sure you're not dreaming right now. So that's that whole phrase. And then there is no reliable way to tell that you're dreaming. Therefore, it is not the case that you can be sure you're not dreaming right now. So I know that's kind of complicated, but that is how you translate into TL. Now it's going to turn out later on, we're going to learn another language where it's kind of more, in a way, it's more intuitive. It's more symbols, but it's actually more intuitive in the end. Okay, let's do that again. Oh, by the way, it is a modus ponens. So all you really see here is that is our antecedent. That is our consequent. So all you should really see when you see this is if P, then Q. Those are the bold, right? P, therefore Q. That's all that really is. I know there's tildes and stuff in there, but by now you should begin to be thinking of this as a unit, right? This is just basically, when you look at this, you should only really see, ideally, you should only see that this is a conditional. I know you see a whole lot of other things too, but really it's just a conditional. That's the main operator. So that's the way you should begin to read these. That's essentially just a conditional. Over here, you essentially just see the antecedent of the conditional in one. And over here, you just see the consequent of the conditional in one. So eventually you shouldn't be looking always at tildes and all that. You should really allow yourself to see the sentence in terms of its main operator, because that's what the sentence really is. That is ultimately just a conditional. That's the way you should see it now. So, okay, let's do that again, maybe a little faster this time. If is a logical indicator word, there's an implied then right there. Let me get rid of this stuff over here. There's an implied then. So there's your conclusion indicator. Didn't read them, did not read them. So never read is essentially a no, right? So stop buying, that's essentially a no. Stop buying, that's essentially a no. Okay, so what I see here then is N it stands for, I suppose it stands for read your textbooks, but when you translate it to TL, essentially what you're saying is if it's not the case that you read your textbooks, then it should not be the case that you buy your textbooks. That's essentially what's being said there. You don't buy your textbooks, or someone doesn't buy their textbooks. So we can infer that they don't read their textbooks. Now, as it turns out, this is actually a fallacy. It is not a well-organized, well-structured argument. It's essentially a conditional, right? That's what one is. And then it's the consequent. Oops, that's a Q. And then you get your antecedent, the P. So that is something that we've defined as a fallacy. We've identified that as a fallacy. We haven't proved it's a fallacy yet, but we will. But this is a fallacy, right? So that is affirming the consequent. So, okay. All right, so let's do number 3 now. Okay. Either or. All right, that immediately tells me I'm working with disjunction. Not the case. I got a tilde. All right, so in that case, the propositions are pretty straightforward. You're a teacher or you're a student. So either you're a teacher or you're a student. You're not a student, therefore you're a teacher. That one is pretty straightforward. And yes, it is a disjunctive syllogism. Either this or this, not this, therefore the first thing, right? So either this or that, not that, therefore this. Okay, and let's do the last one here. Why not? Ooh, this is the problem of evil. It's a very famous argument. Here we have some logical indicator words. Then not the case, no, no, therefore no, right? So given that the first sentence has the if-then structure, we know we're working here with a conditional. We also know that there's essentially 2 parts to it. God exists and there would be no unnecessary suffering. So let's say G stands for God exists, U stands for there is unnecessary suffering. So then the tilde means there is no unnecessary suffering. So that's premise 1. Premise 2, it's basically saying it's not the case that there is no unnecessary suffering. So if that means there's unnecessary suffering, and that says it's not the case that there is no unnecessary suffering. I know that seems redundant, but we have to translate the logical indicator words into the appropriate operators. So, okay. And then, of course, at the end, we have, it is not the case that God exists, right? So God does not exist. Not the case that God exists. This is, again, it is simply a modus tollens. You should be at this point identifying just a conditional, right? That means that this is P, and I guess we'll use a different color here. That's P, and that's Q. And notice that that's Q right there, plus a tilde, right? That tilde is extra, so to speak. So we have to make sure that we notice that it's not the same as just Q. It's actually Q plus a tilde. So essentially what this statement says so far is premise one says, gives some conditional, right? If P then Q. And then premise two is saying not Q. It's saying, it's denying this. I know it's confusing because there's two tildes there, but this one has one tilde already, which means if you add a tilde, you're saying not Q. You're not just saying Q again, you're saying not Q. And of course, the conclusion is just the antecedent plus a tilde, which means the conclusion is the antecedent P plus a tilde. So that is, of course, the conditional, the negation of the consequent, therefore the negation of the antecedent. That is standard modus tollens. So I hope that helps.